This podcast is brought to you by AutoVision and its new AI assistant, Avery. Avery delivers data-driven appraisals, pricing, and detailed strategies for every vehicle. Visit autovision.com to learn more about Avery, where precision meets profit.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Friday, May 16th, 2025. I'm Jamie Butters, Executive Editor of Automotive News in Detroit.
And I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, the numbers are in, and tariffs are cutting into North American auto production. Toyota overhauls its supply chain process amid tariffs, and EV registrations continue to surge in March. Plus, the increasing complexity of vehicles are making collision repair more difficult. Andreas Hecht, Senior Vice President of Mobility at CCCIS, joins the show to talk about it.
When you have hundreds of shops that are under a single roof, if they wanted to become certified for an OEM and that OEM requires specific equipment that deviates from their norm, that's a really big barrier to entry.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry.
Executives and analysts have warned for months that auto tariffs will lead to less vehicle production in North America. New data shows that decline is underway. The region will produce about 126,000 fewer vehicles this quarter because of tariffs than it otherwise would have. That's according to an estimate by Auto Forecast Solutions. The estimate accounts for production changes announced by automakers through May 1st, including both cuts and planned increases. It's a small number, accounting for less than 1% of the 16 million vehicles the region produced in 2024, but it illustrates the effects tariffs are having on the industry as automakers respond to rapidly changing trade rules that President Donald Trump says are meant to return manufacturing to the U.S. Auto Forecast Solutions says the expected decline is driven by higher production costs related to tariffs, particularly in Canada and Mexico.
As the global auto industry comes to grips with new U.S. tariff policies allowing suppliers to see an automaker's production plans farther out is becoming more valuable. With that in mind, Toyota Motor North America is overhauling its supply chain management software and will offer something new to suppliers, a one-year look forward into its production plans, instead of just one quarter. The move is part of an ongoing multi-year plan to modernize the Japanese automaker's North American supply chain. Toyota has replaced 75 labor-intensive, decades-old spreadsheets with consolidated, cloud-based forecasting tools that the company expects to be much more accurate.
New electric vehicle registrations surged 20% in March. That's according to new data from S&P Global Mobility. EV registrations numbered almost 116,000 in March, good for a 7.5% share of the U.S. light vehicle market. That's up from 7.1% a year earlier. March EV registrations outpaced gains in the overall light vehicle market, which increased 14% to more than 1.5 million vehicles. Gasoline and diesel vehicles had a 78% share, and hybrids accounted for about 14%. That hybrid share represented a 3.4 percentage point increase from the same month last year, the largest of any powertrain segment.
And consumers are unimpressed with many driver assistance features and uncertain if more advanced systems will be useful. That's the assessment of a new J.D. Power white paper. It calls into question whether the efforts automakers are expending on driver assistance upgrades are worthwhile. Owners of systems that offer Level 2 automated driving do not consider the systems convenient, and more advanced hands-free systems are not resonating with consumers. Motorists did not understand if the fundamental purpose of the systems was to offer convenience or improve safety. Only 24% of respondents felt that active driving systems made them better drivers. And those are today's headlines. Toyota is overhauling its supply chain management software and will offer a one-year look forward into its production plans instead of one quarter. Jamie, this has to make Toyota suppliers very happy. And how does this fit in with the current tariff situation?
Yeah, definitely more clarity for suppliers is helpful at any time, but especially with the uncertainty that this year brings, right? There's still a risk that, a plant could get shut down and have ripple effects to other plants. But Toyota's trying to give this guidance, and the nature of a crisis, if you're communicating, if you're over communicating, then even if you have to change plans, you have more credibility with your business partners because they know what you're thinking, they know what you're trying to do, and if something comes up, they're more likely to forgive, an erroneous forecast than if you just don't tell them anything. Then it breeds more suspicion. It's definitely going to put more pressure on other automakers to compete because Toyota is going to have the best relations, and that tends to get you a lot of good cooperation.
Gotcha. Coming up, Andreas Hecht of CCCIS joins the show to talk about why it's important to grow the number of manufacturer certified body shops. That's next on Daily Drive.
Just when you think you've priced a vehicle perfectly to sell fast, the market changes and potential profit slips through your fingers. After all the work of scouring auction sites, tracking competitor rates, and analyzing market trends, the loss of time and money leaves you frustrated. Meet Avery, your AI assistant from AutoVision. Avery revolutionizes how you acquire, price, and sell vehicles by analyzing every detail, from retail values to market trends. And the best part? Avery doesn't just give you numbers, it explains every recommendation so you know everything that was factored in. Picture this: faster appraisals, smarter stocking decisions, and more profitable sales, all without the exhausting legwork. With Avery, you don't just stay competitive, you lead the pack. Ready to see Avery in action? Visit autovision.com.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jamie Butters with Kellen Walker. Nearly 4 out of 5 collision centers on carwise.com do not show as participating in any manufacturer certified network. And the total number of certified collision centers, about 5,000 in the U.S., has not really changed in the past 10 years. Andreas Hecht is Senior Vice President of Mobility at CCCIS and author of a white paper on the topic. He spoke with Automotive News Senior Editor Dan Shine about why the growing complexity of vehicles demands more manufacturer-certified body shops.
Andreas, thank you so much for joining me on the Fixed Ops Friday edition of Daily Drive.
Thank you, Dan. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
So you wrote an interesting white paper, I guess, a report for CCC Intelligent Solutions on the need for more manufacturer certified body shops. Tell me a little bit like why you kind of settled on this and the kind of the impetus behind doing that report.
The impetus was really around a perceived problem that I get a lot of feedback in my position dealing with a lot of the vehicle manufacturers, that there's a perceived lack of qualified repair shops that essentially adhere to all the training, all the standards, repair procedures, what have you, that are desired by the car makers in order to put the car back into its original form following a collision. So, and as we sort of dug into the numbers, we noticed that over the last 10 years, so for reference, there's only about 5,000 certified OEM certified shops in the U.S. today. That's out of a total of, call it 35,000 to 40,000, depending on how you count. And that number hasn't grown in the last 10 years, right? So now when you think about, there's a heavy concentration where those 5,000, they typically have qualifications for more than a single vehicle manufacturer. But what is disturbing is the fact that that number has been stagnated. The complexity of our vehicles, when you just think about the amount of ADAS and other sensors, different materials, aluminum, you name it, that essentially poses a problem because you can't explain to me how the same number of shops that were repairing vehicles 10 years ago are sufficient to repair a larger car park with more complex vehicles today, right? So I think the OEs, I'm going to just use the term OEM or OEs or vehicle manufacturer, they're waking up to this reality. They are looking at it within their own, for their particular brands, and they're trying to sign up more stores, but they always end up falling back to the same number of stores, to the same 5,000 stores. They just add another certification. And that's essentially what we're calling attention to is how do we get the industry to go to 10,000 or 15,000 shops? They may not have as many certifications across different OEs, but the number just needs to increase.
And why is that? And why is there just body shops, collision shops don't see the value in hanging a little framed certificate from Toyota or GM saying that they're certified?
Yeah, there's really a number of different reasons. First of all, it is a cost, right? When you think about an OEM might tell you need to have this type of equipment, you need to have specific training, and this training used to be, for instance, like, hey, as long as you're ICAR Gold certified, you're good. But nowadays, they're actually demanding that individuals within the shop actually get qualified and receive that training, and they track that. Right. So since there's a huge turnover of personnel in the industry, it's really hard to kind of maintain that consistency in the training. And so then you got equipment. Some of the OEMs will require a particular brand of equipment, or if you think about a frame bench now that you got a much heavier electric vehicles coming to market, you need a different type of frame bench. Right? So all of that is sort of exacerbating the cost, and a shop is going to look at their ROI and say, all right, what am I going to get? I'm going to spend a bunch of money to support all these different certifications. With an insurance company, when they're part of what we call direct repair program, where they're part of a network where the insurance company sends them essentially new business, they don't get a lot of traffic coming from the OEs, right? So that when they look about the ROI, like, how many cars am I going to get more for my repairs in return for all the costs that I'm incurring? That's kind of the conundrum, right? So what we sort of spelled out in the white paper is, well, I think there's a case to be made around something of a bit more of a standard around the certification, right? The more we can harmonize, or that the OEMs can harmonize around their requirements, the more we're going to lower the barrier to entry, essentially.
More like standardize, try and get the automakers to kind of standardize.
Correct. So for instance, if you take an equipment, some vehicle manufacturers will say, hey, I need to have this particular brand of welder, or I need you to have this particular brand of welder. Another one will say, you can have any welder as long as it meets the specification, right? The latter will make it a lot easier for a shop to buy it once and serve multiple vehicle brands, versus the alternative of buying a different welder of a particular brand for every new program they want to support, right?
If insurance companies said to body shops, we're not going to direct our customers to you if you're not certified in these, would that be an impetus to get more to be certified? Is that a possible answer, or are there other better answers?
Yeah, it's I would say there's a growing, we've seen some growth in the number of in sort of the awareness by the insurance companies of these certified programs. It's not pervasive by any stretch. So I would say that's not going to be an overnight solution. That's going to take time. So it is growing. The awareness is growing, but I would say it's still early days when it comes to that.
And I think I saw, 4 out of 5 collision shops don't have any certifications. Is it just also a fact that the customers, to them, they're not aware, or they don't care? If they just, if it's a referral from a friend, they say, oh, they did my car, they did a great job. I don't care.
Yeah, you touch on a great point, right? When you think about the consumers don't understand really how their car gets fixed, right? If you got a newer car, what do you do if you get into a crash? You're not going to go to a body shop. You're typically going to take it to your dealer. Your dealer, in most cases, will not actually do the repair, but rather they will have a relationship, or in some cases they will have ownership of a collision repair shop, right? So they don't understand what goes on behind the scenes. They just want to get their car fixed, right? So they don't know, because it's not a widely advertised, or there's not a lot of awareness around it. Consumers just don't know what to ask for in this particular case. They just assume everything is going to be put back together the way it left the factory.
Right. Does consolidation, many dealerships kind of shedding their collision centers or leasing them out to, and the the calibers of the world, kind of consolidating and buying up. Does that play a role in this kind of lack of certifications across the board?
It certainly does. Just because when you think about some of these larger, what we call multi-store operators, they're highly, focused on operational excellence. They have their own standards, right? So it's I would say it's not always easy when you have thousands of, hundreds of shops that are under a single roof. If they wanted to become certified for an OEM and that OEM requires specific, equipment that deviates from their norm, that's a really big barrier to entry. So as you rightly point out, that's a bit of a blocker.
Got it. Well, Andreas, interesting stuff. We don't talk about collision enough on Fixed Ops Friday, so I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights from CCIS. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Dan.
Andreas Hecht is Senior Vice President of Mobility at CCCIS. He spoke with our own Dan Shine. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jamie Butters.
And I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer, as well as our own John Irwin, Larry Velquette, Lawrence Ilift, and Pete Bigelow for their reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on service and parts, manufacturing, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com.
Come back over the weekend for our Weekend Drive edition of the show. Our own Hannah Lutz and Lindsay Van Hully preview next week's 100 Leading Women Awards Gala and Conference, honoring women who are having an impact on the auto industry.
A lot of them said in 5 years, I would hope that the women that I mentored and that I advocated for are on this list.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoyed the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.